wooden dummy absorbed the impact of her palm strike with a hollow thud that echoed through the Foshan Wing Chun school. Ip Qing, Ip Man's daughter, had trained on this exact dummy since age 5. At 23 years old, her strikes carried the precision and power that came from 18 years of daily practice. She was the only woman Ip Man had ever certified to teach Wing Chun independently. And today, she would face the ultimate test of her abilities. Bruce Lee watched from across the training hall, having arrived at his teacher's request without knowing why. What he was about to discover would change everything he thought he knew about his place in Wing Chun history. This is the story of the challenge that would determine who would carry Ip Man's legacy forward, and why the grandmaster himself designed this test to push both his daughter and his most famous student beyond anything they had faced before. Foshan Dong Province, China, March 22, 1970. The Wing Chun school occupied a traditional courtyard building that had served the Ip family for 3 generations. Morning sunlight filtered through paper windows, illuminating dust particles that danced in the air, displaced by training movements. Ip Man, now 79 years old and showing the physical effects of the throat cancer that would claim his life 2 years later, sat in his wooden chair, observing the morning class. His health had been declining for months, and he had been contemplating the question of succession with increasing urgency. The weight of this decision had kept him awake many nights, knowing that his choice would shape Wing Chun's future for decades to come. Ip Qing was not your typical martial arts student. She had begun training at age 5, earlier than most students, because Ip Man wanted to test whether Wing Chun's principles, which emphasized technique over physical strength, could be mastered equally by women and men. 18 years later, Ip Qing had proven the answer was yes. At 5'7" and 155 pounds of lean muscle, she moved with the efficiency that marked high-level Wing Chun. No wasted motion, every gesture purposeful. Her stance was textbook, weight evenly distributed, center line protected, hands in perfect ready position. But Ip Qing was more than just technically proficient. She was the living embodiment of classical Wing Chun, preserving every technique exactly as Ip Man had taught it, maintaining the systematic training methodology that had been refined over generations. Bruce Lee had been training with Ip Man since 1954, when he was 13 years old, and had studied for 5 years before moving to the United States in 1959. He had returned to Hong Kong periodically, but this visit to Foshan was unusual. Ip Man had sent a formal letter requesting Bruce's presence, which suggested something significant was being planned. Bruce arrived at the school early in the morning, wearing simple black training clothes, and found Ip Qing completing her wooden dummy practice. Ip Man gestured for Bruce to approach. When Bruce bowed respectfully and asked what service he could provide, Ip Man's response was direct. "I am 79 years old and my health is failing. I have been thinking about who should carry the true understanding of Wing Chun forward after I am gone." Bruce listened intently, sensing the gravity in his teacher's voice. "You, Bruce, have become famous and you have modified Wing Chun into your Jeet Kune Do. My daughter, Ip Qing, has remained here preserving classical Wing Chun exactly as I taught it. Both paths have value, but I can officially recognize only one person as my successor, the one I publicly acknowledge as my best student." Bruce began to speak, but Ip Man raised his hand. "I have designed a test. You will fight my daughter, Ip Qing, under traditional Wing Chun rules, hands only, no kicking, pure technique. The match will last until one fighter yields or I call a stop." The old master's eyes held the weight of tradition and the burden of decision. "If you defeat Ip Qing, I will formally announce you as my best student, and you will have my blessing to teach Wing Chun however you choose. If Qing defeats you, she will be recognized as my successor, and the classical style will be preserved through her teaching. If neither defeats the other, I will make no formal designation." The stakes were clear, and both Bruce and Ip Qing understood their weight. This was not about pride or ego, but about the future direction of an entire martial art. Ip Man was essentially asking which approach served Wing Chun better, preservation or evolution. The only way to answer was through direct testing. Ip Qing stepped forward, and Bruce saw her fully for the first time as an opponent rather than a fellow student. She moved with the fluidity that marked mastery, each step deliberate, each gesture economical. Her eyes held the calm focus of someone who had performed thousands of hours of chi sao and knew exactly how her body would respond to any stimulus. Bruce took his position facing her, adopting a modified Wing Chun stance that incorporated elements from his Jeet Kune Do development. Ip Man noticed immediately that Bruce's lead foot was positioned differently, more like a fencer's stance, which would allow faster linear movement but potentially compromise the stable triangular base that traditional Wing Chun emphasized. This was exactly the kind of evolution Ip Man wanted to test. Did Bruce's modifications make Wing Chun more effective, or did they sacrifice core principles for superficial advantages? Ip Man gave the signal to begin. Neither fighter moved immediately. In Wing Chun, especially at high levels, the opening moments often involve subtle positioning rather than dramatic action. Both were reading distance, checking centerline alignment, looking for the micro movements that would indicate intention before actual attack. Ip King moved first, closing distance with a traditional Wing Chun advance, her lead hand extending in a seeking motion designed to establish contact for Chi Sao. Bruce's response was immediate but unexpected. Instead of meeting her hand for traditional Shai Sao, he angled offline, moving to her outside gate, a position that classical Wing Chun typically avoided because it abandoned the centerline principle. His hand struck toward her ribs from this angle, a move that looked more like Western boxing than traditional Wing Chun. Ip King's training activated automatically. Her Bong Sao deflection rose to redirect Bruce's strike, but she had to adjust the angle because his attack came from an unconventional position. The deflection succeeded, but Bruce had already moved again, circling to her other side with footwork that prioritized mobility over the rooted structure that Ip Man had taught. Ip Man watched carefully, noting that Bruce was testing whether movement and angles could overcome traditional centerline control. Ip King adjusted her strategy. If Bruce wanted to move, she would cut off his movement. She advanced with a straight, line attack, chain punches delivered with the rapid, fire rhythm that Wing Chun is famous for. Each punch recycled into the next, creating continuous pressure that forced opponents to deal with multiple threats simultaneously. Bruce backpedaled, his modified footwork allowing quick retreat, but Ip King pressed forward, maintaining contact distance. Bruce found himself in a position he had experienced countless times during his early training, facing the relentless forward pressure that makes Wing Chun so effective at close range. His Jeet Kune Do modifications had emphasized intercepting attacks and counterstriking, but Ip King's chain punches were so continuous that interception required perfect timing. He chose a different response, one that would have been heretical to classical Wing Chun. He deliberately moved backward and to the side, creating a longer distance where chain punches couldn't maintain their rhythm. Ip Man's eyes narrowed. Bruce was deliberately fighting at a range where Wing Chun's close, quarter advantages disappeared. This was strategic intelligence, but it also represented abandoning the art's core principle that Wing Chun fighters should close distance and dominate close range rather than retreat. Was this evolution or abandonment? Ip King didn't chase. Instead, she reset to her ready position, centerline protected, waiting for Bruce to re-engage. This was classical Wing Chun strategy: maintain your structure, don't overcommit, let the opponent come to you and make mistakes. Bruce circled, looking for an opening, but Ip King's position was tight, no obvious vulnerabilities. Her 18 years of training showed in the small details. Her elbows protected her ribs, her hands covered the centerline in layers, her weight distribution allowed instant response in any direction. Bruce tested with a low line attack, a quick hand toward her lead knee, trying to draw a reaction that would open high line opportunities. Ip King's response was a Gan Sao downward block performed with minimal movement, just enough to deflect the probe while keeping her upper structure intact. Bruce immediately followed with a high attack, which Ip King met with a Pak Sao and simultaneous strike, the Wing Chun principle of defending and attacking in the same motion. For the next several minutes, they engaged in what appeared to observers as a high-speed chess match of hands. Bruce would probe with modified attacks incorporating elements from Western boxing and fencing, looking for weaknesses in classical structure. Ip King would respond with textbook Wing Chun, demonstrating that traditional techniques, when performed with perfect timing and structure, could handle unconventional attacks. Neither gained clear advantage. Ip Man watched both fighters carefully. He saw that Bruce had indeed evolved Wing Chun, adding elements that made it more adaptable to different ranges and angles. But he also saw that Ip King's classical approach had depth that Bruce's modifications hadn't fully replaced. The question wasn't who was winning this particular exchange, but whose approach had more long-term validity. The turning point came when both fighters simultaneously decided to fully commit. Bruce launched a combination that mixed Wing Chun chain punches with boxing hooks, trying to overwhelm Ip King's structure with attacks from multiple angles. Ip King met this with a bong sao that flowed into lop sao, attempting to trap Bruce's lead hand and create the controlling position that Wing Chun seeks. For a brief moment, they were locked in close, range chess at full fighting speed. Both fighters' hands moving in a blur of conditioned reflexes, each seeking to control the other's center line. In that exchange, something remarkable happened that Ip Man had hoped to see. Both fighters demonstrated perfect Wing Chun principles despite their different approaches. Bruce's modified techniques, when pushed to maximum pressure, revealed Wing Chun structure underneath the superficial changes. Ip King's classical techniques, when tested by Bruce's unconventional attacks, showed adaptability that rigid traditionalism wouldn't have allowed. They weren't fighting different arts. They were demonstrating different expressions of the same fundamental principles. Ip Man raised his hand, signaling stop. Both fighters immediately disengaged and stepped back, breathing hard but controlled. They had been fighting for approximately 8 minutes, which doesn't sound long, but represents enormous output when every second contains multiple techniques, executed at full speed and intensity. The match had tested not just their techniques, but their understanding of Wing Chun's deepest principles. Sweat dripped from both fighters, evidence of the intensity they had both brought to this crucial test. Enough, Ip Man said quietly. He stood slowly from his chair, his age evident in the effort required, and walked to the center where both fighters waited. He looked at Ip King first, then at Bruce, his expression unreadable. Ip King, your Wing Chun is perfect. Every technique exactly as I taught, every principle preserved. You are the living archive of classical Wing Chun, and you have proven that the traditional art, when mastered completely, needs no modification to be effective. Ip King bowed, accepting the recognition but clearly waiting for more. Ip Man turned to Bruce. Bruce, your modifications to Wing Chun show understanding of the principles at a level where you can apply them outside the original form. You have tested the art against other methods and kept what works while adding what was missing. You are the evolution of Wing Chun into something that can adapt to any situation. Bruce also bowed, but like Ip King, he waited. I asked you to fight to help me decide who should be my successor. Ip Man continued. But watching you fight showed me that I was asking the wrong question. Wing Chun doesn't need one successor. It needs both preservation and evolution. The old master's voice carried the weight of decades of wisdom. Ip King, you will be recognized as the keeper of classical Wing Chun, the one who teaches the art exactly as it has been passed down. Bruce, you will be recognized as the innovator, the one who shows how Wing Chun principles can grow and adapt. He paused, looking at both of them with evident pride. You are both my best students, for different reasons, and Wing Chun will be stronger for having both paths. The solution was unexpected but felt right to both fighters. Ip King would preserve the technical precision and systematic training that allowed Wing Chun to be transmitted accurately across generations. Bruce would continue developing Jeet Kune Do, demonstrating how martial arts principles could evolve beyond their traditional forms. Both approaches served the art, just in different ways. The future of Wing Chun is not in choosing between preservation and evolution, Ip Man said. It is in understanding that both are necessary. A tree needs both roots and branches. Roots give stability and nourishment. Branches reach toward new possibilities. Ip King stepped forward and bowed to Bruce. Thank you for pushing me to demonstrate that classical Wing Chun can meet any challenge. Bruce returned the bow. Thank you for showing me that innovation must always respect the foundation it builds upon. Ip Man smiled, the first genuine smile any of them had seen from him in months. This is exactly what I hoped to see, not competition, but complement, not division but unity in diversity. March 22, 1970, Foshan Wing Chun School. 8 minutes of fighting that answered a question about the future of a martial art. Ip Man would pass away in December 1972, but his decision that day established a model that martial arts still follow, honoring both tradition and innovation. Understanding that preservation and evolution aren't contradictory but complementary. Ip King continued teaching classical Wing Chun in Foshan, maintaining the precise techniques and systematic training methodology that Ip Man had refined over his lifetime. Her students learned not just techniques, but the philosophical foundation that gave those techniques meaning. Bruce continued developing Jeet Kune Do, ultimately creating a martial arts philosophy that influenced multiple generations of fighters worldwide. His approach showed that respecting tradition didn't mean being bound by it. Neither approach invalidated the other. Together, they represented the complete picture of what martial arts could be, rooted in wisdom, reaching toward possibility. The legacy of that day wasn't a single successor to Ip Man's tradition. It was the understanding that greatness can take multiple forms, that wisdom lies not in choosing between preservation and evolution, but in honoring both. Sometimes the greatest tests reveal not who is best, but how different forms of excellence can coexist and strengthen each other. That is the true legacy of Ip Man's final lesson.